All right. Do I want to do this one next? I'm tempted to jump around a little bit because I want to really challenge you. Can we come back to this issue of ice bathing and whether it's indicated by science? Let me just say this to you to try to spark your imagination, so maybe you want to hang around with me afterwards over a cold refreshment. Let me just say this. Jeff Mester's coined two terms, what I call compensatory inflammation and adaptive inflammation. I was always troubled by the concept of ice bathing because ice bathing, as I was introduced to it, was undertaken to minimize inflammation, yes? I've always thought inflammation from an evolutionary perspective was exactly what we wanted. Now, I think there can be, quote unquote, compensatory inflammation, like the inflammation that accompanies a sprained ankle when, quote unquote, the ankle blows up. That's a compensatory inflammation that's protective in nature, yes? But the inflammation that our student athletes incur with a training session, 5 times 1,000, whatever it might be, 6 times a mile, 3 times a mile, whatever it might be, that inflammation, intuitively, at least as a trained physiologist, I always thought it was good. And then there was a paper that came out about 7 years ago, and I probably won't show it to you today, I can talk about it later, that absolutely reinforced everything I thought. And I was shocked it wasn't discussed in the broader community. And then finally, was it Steve Magnus, as per Jay's comment, Steve Magnus in Running Times about a year ago, 18 months ago, came out and said, well, at Nike Oregon Project, before Steve left, at Nike Oregon Project, we don't ice bathe if we're in a training phase which is adaptive in nature. We ice bathe when we are trying to simply restore the body. For example, when they arrived at the 2012 Olympic track and field trials in Eugene, they went back to ice bathing because at that point they weren't trying to enhance their conditioning, they were simply trying to restore the body. So when they stepped to a starting line for a heat of a 5,000 or a final of a 5,000 or a final of a 10,000, when they stepped to a starting line to compete for a spot in the U.S. Olympic team, they were fully restored and ready to utilize their fitness. But ice bathing as a daily intervention, one could argue against that. And I'll just leave one thought with you. And where is it? There's the paper I want to look at, perhaps later. But if I could please, there's the question that I've always had. If you would please, water bathing or ice bathing being one form of cryotherapy. But let me just share this statement from the authors, if I can find it. I didn't put it there, I'm sorry. Here's a statement from a paper in 2006, and I apologize for asking my peers to read, but if I could indulge you, and you could indulge me for just one moment to read a slide, which is admittedly too, if you will, text dense. This is a paper from 2006, which was published out of a group, or by a group in Japan, and what that says in simple terms, is, for lack of a better phrase, cellular stress is a prerequisite to optimizing adaptation. You want to induce mechanical stress, all right? Now, we can talk about excessive mechanical stress. We can talk about rhabdomyolysis, but we're not talking about rhabdomyolysis, for example. We're talking about the stresses that accompany a 10-mile run, or 6 times a mile, or 2 times a mile, or whatever it might be. That degree of mechanical stress and some of the structural challenges that, if you will, imparts to skeletal muscle, I would argue quite simply, those are good and you want them. Those are good and you want them. And so that's the conclusion of those authors, and more detail to follow. But I guess I would encourage you, if you're open to the thought, to simply, to the extent that you do use ice bathing, to simply ask yourself, when do I want to use it? And is it something I want to use every day if my goal is for my athletes to adapt optimally to the training I ask them to complete?